Toronto is now the most expensive city in all of Canada. Stay tuned to find out exactly why. Promise you, it'll be worth it. Good day, Toronto. Welcome to another episode of Prime Properties TV. So glad you joined me here today. The first article we got talking about is this one. And oh boy, is it going to be fun. Toronto beats Vancouver as the most expensive real estate markets after the month of January 2022. This means that we have now surpassed Vancouver as the most expensive city in all of Canada. I don't know if we should put a crown on or be proud or just be like, holy crap, the affordability in the GTA is actually really, really bad, right? So I don't know where most people stand on this. I always thought, Vancouver was going to be the most expensive city, but guess not anymore, right? So if we go through this article, you can see here that they're saying Vancouver is now $5,000 less than the average Toronto house. Now, this is based on what we call the HPI, which is the home price index. And the idea of the home price index is to kind of take your standardized home and kind of bring it down into the average price, like the standard price. Because if you use averages, sometimes if you have say a $10 million home sell, then it skews the average. So what I will say about this metric, while those who are Toronto fearing of, affordability crisis and being this is, unacceptable because Vancouver should be more expensive because it's more coastal. You have to remember that Toronto has bigger homes than Vancouver. So it's not like comparing, the same house to the same house, because the HPI in Vancouver has smaller homes than Toronto, because Toronto, other side of the semis, most of the detaches are geared towards 4 bedrooms, which gears the pricing of the HPI higher. Whereas in Vancouver, the houses are smaller, right? Now, although condos are a little bit different and they take it out of the HPI in this context, you have to remember, we're not comparing apples to apples. But nonetheless, this is still a very impressive feat. Because if you look at this chart I'm sharing with you right now, you can see that the blue line that represents Toronto has always just kind of been lagging behind under Vancouver. But then basically when the pandemic hit, Toronto was like, here, hold my beer, and just went straight up, and now we just passed it. Now, obviously things can change and we go neck and neck and swap between the two. But right now, all I would say about this article is it's cool, it's headline grabbing, but it doesn't mean anything. That's it. All right, now we got to the next article. We got Ford's Housing Task Force calls for more density and less public consultation. There's been a lot of talks as of late in regards to kind of how to increase supply. And I'm just glad that the government's finally starting to do something about it, right? And the supply is a big component and an issue because we need more supply for the amount of people coming in, right? And while that is one component, I'm going to preface you in everything I tell you in these kind of next few little headlines that while supply is important, it's not the end all be all, okay? Because you also have to look at the demand side. And I've talked about this in many, many videos before. When you have such cheap money and such cheap debt and low interest rate, the demand side increases in real estate because there's nowhere else to put your money. So it needs to be a combination of everything. Like I was talking with Ben about the podcast, it just can't be one silver bullet that fixes all of it. However, will I say that this task force was rather conveniently started just before the election year? Maybe, right? So let's go through some of the things, right? So they're saying that Ontario is planning to build 1.5 million new homes in the next decade. And they've made a whole bunch of recommendations. If anyone wants to read it, the report looks like this. It's about a 33-page of snozfest. You can read it if you want. I read it for you, so I'm gonna summarize it. And here's a couple of the key points, right? From what I gather, they're trying to reduce the red tape in Ontario to build something, because I've talked about it before. The incentive structure is totally off for every single person in terms of kind of whether they're going to be trying to increase supply or not, because the person that stamps everything is at the city level, and the city level person that wants to get elected again tends to be always trying to get elected, and they don't want to piss off the neighbors and the people who elect them, vote for them. So they usually shut down projects. So when you kind of look at a lot of the red tape that gets put on, it's kind of at the city level. So Ford's trying to have a provincial level that's supposed to fix everything. So they're giving the OMB, which is Ontario Municipal Board, more power, and they're going to supercharge it to basically reduce a lot of this red tape. They're also going to start penalizing cities for kind of slowing things down. So what that means is when they penalize it, if you don't get the project approved in time based on the timelines that's provided, then they're just going to either automatically get a green light or they're going to reduce the funding from the province, because the province gives each city the money, right? So if Tory wants money from Ford to build subways or something, then they're more incentivized to push these projects along. And then the other thing they're talking about is loosening zoning restrictions, right? So for anyone who is not a real estate nerd, let me try to explain this to you. Zoning is basically really archaic and old kind of use of land, right? So if you have a house, it says, hey, this is, R1 residential zoning. You can only build R1 type of homes on it, right? Meaning one type of single family detached. So if you ever need to turn that into, say, like a multiplex, you need to go through zoning approval. That takes a long time. Then your neighbors can also come in. That's a whole not in my backyard thing, and they oppose it. They have minor variances, committee hearings, and a whole bunch of stuff where it takes forever to even go from a single family home into essentially a multiplex, right? And the reason that happens is because everyone who's living in the neighborhood hates having a multiplex on the street. So they're always against it. And that is why when those people kind of make a ruckus, they are not going to vote for the person who's in that riding, because they want that person to help negate that multiplex from being built. So when the Ontario government is coming and saying, hey, look, all of that is out the door, that should speed things up, right? Now, when you have single family homes all over the place, I think it's like 72% somewhere they say in the article. When you upzone everything, it's going to allow every single family home to be a multiplex. That should, in theory, 4x the supply, assuming everyone does that. But you have to understand why it may not happen. And this is why I'm thinking that despite the density increase, that's not the silver bullet that's going to fix the housing crisis that we have right now. You have to remember, right now, trades like drywallers, contractors, masonries, all the people that are required to build a home, they're in short supply right now, like really short supply. That's why they're able to charge so much. Like, have you seen what an electrician charges? Like, there's an inflation price and all of that built into this. If you actually go and build anywhere else, the labor and also materials are a lot cheaper. So while we can increase the density of the land use, and that's kind of just like a paper stamp and making it work, I don't think we have enough trades to actually build these homes. So what's going to happen is, let's say, person on 123 Banana Street wants to turn their house into a multiplex. Fantastic. And then they rent out the other 50. Great. Some people want to do that. The problem is, if everyone wants to do that at the same time, there's not enough people to build. It's kind of like if you're trying to find a contractor or find a pool right now during the pandemic. It was really, really difficult, and you have to pay a premium for it. So now if you're paying a premium on top to build these things, your rents have to be justifiable to turn that into a multiplex, which means that your rents are going to go up to kind of cover the cost of it. There's going to be a little gap where if someone's bought a home from a while ago that the carrying cost is very little and they can just refinance and do the multiplex and create money, yes, fantastic. But for anyone who maybe bought in the last like 3 to 4 years in like a single family home in the GTA, maybe it's like $1.5 to $2 million. When you have to carry that and then you have to build construction costs that's increased, the rents may not actually make financial sense. So this is why I'm saying, while this is fantastic and it should increase a lot more like supply, it's going to be very slow and very delayed. And one of the biggest kind of like crux in all of this is the amount of trades we have to do this. So we either need to increase immigration, and in that immigration component, make sure there are more trade workers instead of just like white collar workers, which Canada's been targeting a lot. So it's something to just be mindful of. But nonetheless, I still think this is actually a very, very cool kind of thinking. And we've been saying this a lot. We need to remove all these like single family homes, McMansions and stuff, and just build more density so that we can plan more density around the infrastructure, such as transit and amenities and kind of like malls, so that instead of everyone sprawling out, kind of like what happened in the pandemic, everyone just focuses back in, because it's actually more energy efficient and also financially efficient, in my opinion. However, when I was going through some of this, like there's obviously going to be critics, right? And I'm going to give you kind of their perspective and I'll add a little bit more color to it, right? So they're saying that they want to build twice as many properties than they were in last year, even though there's 100,000 housing starts. That's correct. 100,000 housing starts is a lot. But the challenge with the 100,000 housing starts is they all start at different times, and we don't know what those 100,000 is, right? Like I think I looked into a couple of reports. It's just a lot more condos and purpose-built rentals. So I think there could be some stagnation, like I talked about, in terms of what those are going to be valued at in terms of rent. But anyone who wants to live and raise a family in like a 2-3 bedroom in the city, those are like the missing middle that is required, and those will take some time before they get built, right? And I think that's where the added supply from the upzoning is going to help. Now, they're going to say right here, and I mentioned it earlier, that they're going to try to act on these findings, because again, this is just a report. It's not confirmed yet, before June 2nd election, which tells me, this reminds me of similar to the 2017 election when Kathleen Wynne kind of dropped the foreign buyer tax just before the election, right? Is it pandering for votes? I'm going to stay out of the politics, but coincidence? Maybe, just maybe, right? Now you can see here, this is some talking about, unless you have some kind of restrictions on speculators, we'll see another opportunity to make windfalls and profits for years to come. I agree with that, but it really just depends on the financials of making these properties work. Like if you're kind of like your grandma or your parents own the place for 50 years, obviously, if you have the capability to turn that into a multiplex, yeah, there's a windfall, absolutely. But if you just recently bought something, I don't think the numbers make any sense whatsoever. It's kind of like some of my clients who are looking at building a laneway suite right now to kind of cover the rent. But the cost to build a laneway suite is a lot. So you need to be financially like set or well off or have really low carrying costs on the piece of land or the house before it makes any financial sense. So to say that it's very speculative, I would say no, I would not, because these houses are already really expensive to begin with. It's not like just because there's upzoning, everyone's going to start hoarding these houses, because carrying a $1.5 million house is not easy at all, guaranteed. Then you got another one here from Jessica Bell. A smart and sustainable approach that will allow for construction of more affordable townhomes, duplexes, and triplex. So she agrees, right? And I think that's the same thing. You need that missing middle, smaller homes that make sense. But we're going to have to see how fast we can build a lot of these properties, because if they're really dense in like the 20, 30 kind of foot lots, it could prove to be a problem, especially with lower trades. Then she also says that it locks in people into epic soul destroying 2-hour commutes if they don't do this, because it's the whole urban sprawl thing. I've kind of like slowly changed my tune on that, just because as I'm seeing more and more things progress out of the pandemic, hopefully, knock on wood, fingers crossed, I think there's a lot of people who are going to be slowly working from home permanently, while some do have to come back. But my concern, and this is probably out of this context, is just that if there's so much work from home, at some point, your job will be outsourced somewhere else for cheaper, right? For globalization. I'm just wondering what that dynamic between wage inflation and the demand for inflation is versus outsourcing. That's just going to be interesting to watch. And then we got one last comment that I highlighted here that's actually important. It says, they don't believe that the private sector will be providing more affordable housing rentals. Builders are building what's lucrative, and it's higher end rentals. And that's not because people are evil, but because it's a business trying to make a profit. And this is what I was trying to say. The economics have to make sense, right? And when you look at the condos are built the way they are right now because the studios, the 1 bedrooms, and the 1+1s make the most money when you sell them. The 2 and 3 bedrooms don't, but then the city mandates you build them. So we need kind of like a push down and a deflation on the cost of material and everything to make it more profitable, so that these things actually work out. And this is where I have no idea what's going to happen. But I do think we need more trades, because that should reduce the inflation on the cost of trades and labor. If this is the type of real estate content you enjoy, make sure you help us spread the knowledge by smashing the like button and subscribing to the Prime PPTO channel, because every week we make awesome content like this, sometimes 2 videos, sometimes 3 videos, so that we can be transparent and honest with you, so that when you're ready to make a move, whether you're buying, selling, or investing in your first property, we can help you with that. And you'll be like, oh, you know what? Zhen, he knew what he was talking about. Maybe we should reach out to him. And you can do that by clicking on the link or typing it into your browser, www.chatwithzen.com. All right, and we got the next article here. Canada's real estate forecasts a strong spring supercharged by the bank of mom and dad. Well, that was already kind of happening, right? So you got Benjamin Tall here, who's a CIBC economist. I think he's still at CIBC. And they're saying that you're going to see a lot of people are trying to get into the market before it's too late. I think this is very normal sentiment for most people, especially in the spring market. You see your kids kind of being priced out of the market while you can still do something. Most will do anyway. So that's very common in the Chinese culture, where you borrow some money from your house because you've done really well, and then you put it into pre-con and put it in a condo to get your kids started. Like, it's also very normal for like the Chinese culture to pay for the tuition in university for the kids, because they want them to have like a better start to their career and their young life, right? So that's quite normal. I wouldn't say it's going to fuel the market in the spring. Well, like when I talk to a lot of people who are buying, like, yeah, a lot of them do have help from mom and dad. But the thing is, mom and dad has owned a whole house or owned multiple homes. So it's just kind of like a pulled forward inheritance. So the only time that bank of mom and dad will change the demand side of the equation is they tell and force the kid to buy something, even though they want to, because prices are, going too fast. But if the kid was always going to be looking for a home, getting help from mom and dad isn't really going to add more demand to kind of the way over too much demand already. And then we got one last article here. It says, survey shows new immigrants in a rush to buy first home. I already kind of knew that, right? Now, I will say this, I think, is more of a headline grabbing thing, because when I read down here, they pulled 1,000 potential home buyers. That's a really small sample size. But if you talk to people who are looking to buy, anyone who's kind of immigrating here, and I hear a lot of stories from India, and also kind of like Hong Kong and Chinese people, whether they're coming with money or not, the idea is always to lay roots and buy a home because, you have safety. It's culturally seen as very bad to rent, especially if you have a big family. So everyone pulls their money and buys a home. So that's why you see a lot of kind of like Southeast Asian kind of like homeowners. There's a lot of them on title to help get a bigger home, and it becomes multi-generation family. And that's very norm back in the out east. Same in China too. It's just we're having cultural collisions of what kind of new immigrants bring their culture in terms of how they think about real estate, clashing with non-immigrants here, thinking that everyone's entitled to a home and a white picket fence. I think that clashes. And when I talk to a lot of people who are buying, there is a lot of immigrant story behind this thing. Oh, I just got to get into real estate and you buy something. And when you mix that in with the fact that Toronto real estate has been doing so well, it just makes sense for them to kind of like pull in. Now, there's a funny thing here, like the person that they kind of interviewed, they're saying that the PO region, which is Brampton, Mississauga, and Caledon, are very driven to a lot of newcomers, and anyone 43% have arrived, bought something within like 6 or 10 years, which I mean, it kind of fits into what everyone is thinking right now in terms of the stereotype. But it also happens in a lot of York regions too, where like there have like a grandma, the working mom and dad, and the kids all in one home, even in like say Richmond Hill or Markham. It's very, very common, especially even in the larger homes, because that's the only way to make these work, right? It's not like a young couple living in a home and just taking up like 2,000 square feet. I think there's very, very little of those. It's just more bigger families from the cultural side of things. And kind of the final thing I'm going to add on to, like last week, I talked about what I was thinking about is going to happen in the real estate market and what I'm watching and kind of my prediction. I'll tell you now, it's a little bit earlier than the 2 weeks, but essentially what I was watching out for was how much demand there still is while supply is increasing right now. Because the psychology of what's happening to a lot of would-be sellers is that, hey, I see these prices so far, you know what? In case these headlines are right and the market does crash, maybe I should sell now and cash out and then time the market. I do see that a lot. And why I see that a lot right now is when we're looking at homes to buy, I'm seeing a lot more properties come on the market while tenanted. And as any good listing agent will tell you, you're going to get the most money while it's vacant. But the challenge becomes if you have a tenant there month to month or on full lease, you can't really get them out to kind of sell the house vacant unless you have a good relationship and they voluntarily leave. So what that means is anyone who is selling a home and you can see that's tenanted and it doesn't show very well and there's no photos tells me that they're trying to cash out. So whether they're investors or they're homeowners, that is bringing on a lot more supply than we saw in January. So let me be very clear. I'm not saying that there's so much supply, something's going to crash. I'm just saying we're getting a lot more supply from the markets that I'm looking at than we are in January, which by the way is normal. So what I'm trying to see right now is whether this extra supply that's coming to the market is being pulled forward because there's a lot of people trying to cash out, especially if there's any investors who have tenants in there, right? So when I marry that together to see how much demand there is, right? Let's just say if there's 10 offers on a house and, we only had one house, 10 offer goes on to one house. But if all of a sudden now we have 3x our supply, say there's 3 houses, those 10 buyers are going to split up into 3 houses. And I'm seeing that right now. But what I'm waiting to see is how much more of these offers and demand could stay consistent while all these new houses come online. And are these new houses that come online going to be absorbed? And right now I am seeing that there are less showings, but also a little bit less offers. However, I am still seeing the good homes sell for a lot more, whereas some of the kind of not so great ones are still kind of lingering around and slowly starting to fail on the offer night. Slowly, but there's still way more demand than supply. And now I'm watching whether there's going to be a sentiment change on the March 2nd Bank of Canada interest rate date. Now, I've talked about this many times. Most homeowners who need a home don't care about the interest rate. If they have a pre-approval, they're just going to try to buy regardless of what the interest rate is going to be. But if the investors are freaking out and there's more supply that comes on, is there going to be more supply for that fixed amount of demand? But if there's more demand that's coming in because of FOMO and fear of missing out, that's the dynamic I'm trying to watch out. So right now, my theory was that we're going to probably see another burst at the end of February when the numbers come up because the prices have accelerated some more in the past 2 weeks or so. However, I do think that we're going to probably see some kind of slowdown. And when I say slowdown, I don't mean crash or correction. I just mean the rate of appreciation is going to slow down, meaning that how quickly houses are going up in price should slow down. So maybe instead of 7% in January and what looks like, 8% in February right now by my count, maybe it goes to 2 or 3% in March, which is normal. And thank goodness it will slow down, but that doesn't mean prices are going to come down or crash. That's kind of what my thesis is right now. We're going to see probably in like another 2 weeks when the numbers do come out. But the boots on the ground before the data tells me that we're seeing more supply right now, but the demand is still far greater. So a good take home message for you is instead of maybe 20 offers, we're seeing like 5 to 10, which is still a super strong seller's market. I hope that gives you a little bit of insight on kind of what's happening in the markets. And if you're looking for some real estate help and you want to work with our team, you can book a call with me using the link right here. It's www.chaozhen.com. Until next time, your move, your future. See ya. Now that you're done watching this one, how about this one? Oh, you know what? This one's good too. Ooh, this one's really good. You know what? Just watch them both.